Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. A very warm welcome to our podium, African Voices, the power of freedom of speech. And we could also say the power of African literature. My name is Astrid Vehstedt. I'm the Writers-in-Exile officer of German Pen. And I would very much like to welcome Stella Gaitano. She's from South Sudan. She's a scholarship holder in our Writers in Exile program. Stella Nyanzi from Uganda. She is also a writer and an activist, like Stella Gaitano as well, but I will introduce them later more deeply. And Manfred Metzner, publisher from the publishing house Wunderhorn Verlag, whose publications have a focus on African literature. And I would also like to welcome Judith Raupp. I'm not sure whether she's already with us. She will join us. She's a journalist, and she will join us directly from Congo. So welcome to Judith.
Thank you. Hello, I'm here.
Oh, I can't see her, but I hear you.
Oh, okay. Well, I'm here.
Okay. Yeah, so today we will hear literature from our writers, and we will start always with the literary texts before I will introduce them. Oh, there she is. Hello. I will introduce their biographies. Then we will talk with the publisher with his particular focus on Africa. And I hope we have then time to talk also about the situation in Uganda and in South Sudan, where this literature is also linked to. And we will hear from Judith Raupp, a journalist who's working and who is actually in Congo at the moment, about her particular educational work. I would like to start with Stella Gaitano, and first we hear her text, and then we come into conversation, and I will introduce her. But we do this always like this, that we like to really learn about our authors via her texts, and then later we will learn something more about their biographies. So please, Stella, your text is War Forgets No One.
Yes. First of all, thank you for inviting me, and thank you for the Frankfurt Book Fair to invite us to talk about what happened in our country and be voices for our people or on behalf of our people. My text, War Forgets No One. It's a new text, and this is about the second civil war in Sudan. It was in 1983 until 2005. And when this war started, I was a child. I was 3 years old, and it ended in 2005. And that was the longest war in Africa. It's like 22 years, and it claims 2 million lives and thousands of displaced and IDPs people. War forgets no one. I was 3 years old when the second war started in my country. My mother says we were visiting her family at that time, laying on the ground under the dark sky, lit up by bombardment. But I don't really remember. Childhood saved me, and I forgot. Or maybe it was the kind of amnesia granted by the mercy of trauma. But did the war forget me? War are loyal and just. They never forget you, no matter how hard you try to escape or how much innocent shield you or a while. Yes, I forgot how the war began, but it is precisely linked with me. If only I could recall the thought rising through my mind as it erupted. What did I see at that moment? Perhaps I thought the gunfire was nothing more than stars crashing down from the sky. And maybe I imagined catching one to hide under my blanket, marveling at its glow between my fingers. Or did I see them as scratching images, too hot to touch and flinched? I can't remember. My mother must have faced every imaginable horror as she struggled to shield us that night. Now I know it's a lie. Parents couldn't shield their children from war. I realized this bitter truth when war tested my own motherhood during yet another conflict. And I wished if I could have swallowing my children whole. Our war are relentless. They pursued us without mercy at every stage of life. One might erupt while you are still a fetus in your mother. Perhaps you sensed it, felt her rising around while the frantic beating of her heart strangling, distressing to keep you safe. Then another war broke up during your childhood, but innocence distracts you, allow you to play with the remains of projectile and exchange fake shoots with your playmate. You survive by luck or because another child in the neighborhood now wandered about with self-limbed. The war sticks its tongue out at you, reminding you of its mark on your friend's body. You didn't survive. Then it is strike again, this time when you are a young adult. You throw yourself into the war with every part of you, fighting with your hand, your voice, your thoughts, fully aware that death could claim you at any moment. It fate lest you escape. This one, another war will erupt when you are a parent. That when your soul is split apart, as you realize that you can't shield your own children. I doubt I ever managed to shield my children when they faced their first war. As for me, I have long lost track of how many there have been. I recently learned from last year teacher that my son, who was in 7th grade at that time, gave a presentation about Sudan. My son spoke of every beautiful thing about Sudan, but he ended by the war, that how the war affected them, and he cried. Didn't I say that war forgets no one? What if the second war had never erupted between us? Would we have stopped accounting? Could it have been avoided? How many chances for peace we skirt through? How many chances of peace we have and we never get it? I was, and I still am, most affected with the Second War. It was when I grew up, our faith in Vehstedt. The time I turned 10, the war had entered to seventh year. Devouring South Sudan slowly. South Sudan is my home. My mother wore mourning clothes, not just for her loved one who are died, but for an entire life which is died in South Sudan. We inherited her grief and made it our own. Like the war, sorrow became an companion to our childhood. Even the television and radio would have
nullified.
Would have nullified to the state of mourning. We were deprived of cartoon and child song, and it's embedded in our consciousness that war was a state of deprivation. As I grew, the war grew with me, extending to create a pleasing war between North and South. It was at this war that my consciousness exploded. I found myself entangled in the war, forced to take a side. I chose my mother's sorrow and fears, which eventually became my own. I had no choice to become an enemy of war. I fought it through writing, and by writing, I seek to survive. In recounting of my experience with war, I strive to rise above the dichotomy of aggression and defenders, victors and vanquished, during attention instead to profound human tragedy. With Stark, clarify the defeat of humanity. Every war has one last chance to be prevented, but we squared it time and again. Which war are we in now? The 8th? The 10th? I have lost count. War also breeds and granted a fresh conflict to each generation. Didn't I say it was just? Individuals or groups may ignite a war, but only the solidarity of humanity, united and shared faith, can put an end to it. For whom among us hasn't held a bullet in their memory. Thank you.
Thank you, Stella. This was a little bit unfair because your mother tongue is Arabic, and at the moment you're learning German, and you speak German very well. So now you have another text in English, and it is a very new text. You wrote it several weeks ago in the museum, Historic Museum of Berlin, and you were inspired, as you told me, by the title of this exhibition, Roads Not Taken.
Yes.
So, thank you. First of all, I would just short introduction. Stella is a very special person from Sudan because she was she's trained in natural sciences. She's a pharmacist, and she's a known writer in Sudan. I think one of the first, especially female writers in Sudan, who now gained international reputation, especially being published in English and also in German. There's a book out which is, the title is Endlose Tage am Point Zero, with short stories from Sudan, which is a very readable book, and we can also offer it here if you are interested. This also won a prize at the Litprom Weltempfänger. That was the first prize in summer 24. And you can also read it as an audiobook on ARD Mediathek. Now, you have seen a lot of hardships, and you write, and there's one sentence in your text that you say, you write against the war. This is what you do?
Yes, I think writing is my tool. And when I discovered that I have this talent to write about, so I asked myself, what could I do while my country is all the time getting to this conflict, and it is repeat itself every time, and how we can stop it, and what we could do as citizens of this country. And also not just as citizens, but as victims, because war is affected anyone, and it's make people displaced or get refuge somewhere else, and people are really suffering. And unfortunately, till now we have that, and it's never end. In Sudan, the first war in Sudan was in 50s, then in 60s there is a war, and till now also in Sudan, in South Sudan after independence there is also 2 wars, and it's all civil war between us. And that's why I want to write about this, how war affecting people and how people are suffering because of the decision of the politician or the politics who are like making this decision, who are conflict among themselves, and then bring this suffering to all people.
Now, you did something different in Sudan already because you were working in Darfur. You were really doing some sort of peace work all the time. And everything which you were doing as a political activist, you were focusing on peace. How was this at that time? Because it is more or less forgotten here in Europe.
Yes, my idea is peace is really something fragile in our region, and most time when we are in peace, we didn't think that how we can make this peace something sustainable and lasting for a long time. And that's why I was all the time like talk with people, the activists, that we're supposed to work hard during the peacetime just to restore peace. And because if war started, we couldn't do that anymore. And because during all this war, youths were like involved in this war, and they used them to fight in all this war. So for me, that how to open the mind of those youth through reading, for example, And that was one of my projects, that to establish libraries and make use read books and like acquire something like dialogue for communication, not just violence. And that was, but now it's stopped in Sudan because of conflict, and people now thinking about how to survive during this hard time.
I think you should enter into the history books of Sudan for doing this, and not only the war makers, because this is the real work to do. I would like to deepen this, but we have also other people on the podium. Stella Nyanzi, I would also like to invite you first to read your texts, and then we will talk about you and about your work.
Great, thank you. Thank you very much, Astrid. Can you hear me? Yes. Right, so Uganda doesn't have war, we have a dictator. And in terms of writing about freedom of the word, I'll read 2 poems which I wrote earlier. The first one is called Sad Things Happen in Museveni's Uganda. Museveni is the name of the president of my country. Sad things happen in Museveni's Uganda. A poetess is imprisoned for a poem. Her poems occupy national intelligence for months. Stella Nyanzi, we see the repressive state from your example. Sad things happen in Museveni's Uganda. A cameraman is shot dead. His camera falls onto the ground. Drops of blood cloud the camera focus. Ashraf Kasidye, we hear the cries for protecting journalists in your scars. Sad things happen in Museveni's Uganda. An author is arrested for a book of fiction. His novel is confiscated and probed as an exhibition. Trauma engulfs his body and mind, tortured during interrogation. Kakwenza Rukira Bashaija, we smell the tormentor's hatred in your trauma. Sad things happen in Museveni's Uganda. A cartoonist is handcuffed from the streets of Kampala. His computer smashes as it is loaded up a police patrol truck. Pictures caricaturing the dictator marked him for prison. Fred Senoga Makubuya, this could have been you had it not been for the USA. Sad things happen in Museveni's Uganda. An international correspondent on his knees is flogged in broad daylight. His torture by soldiers is captured by his crew on Reuters cameras. He is assigned to a wheelchair for painless mobility. James Akena, we see the dictator's shamelessness in your limp. Sad things happen in Museveni's Uganda. A television presenter spends a night in a congested police cell. He is picked from outside the television studio just after his broadcast. The nation whispers about his release without charges. Samson Kasumba, we wonder about our own free speech in your arrest. Sad things happen in Museveni's Uganda. A journalist is kidnapped by state agents. Her hair is shaved off after beatings during interrogation. She is penalized for defending a government critic who questioned the First Lady. Gertrude Owitware, we fear for our lives when we see your shaved head. Sad things happen in Museveni's Uganda. An editor of an online publication is murdered in a bar. His writings were critical of a neighboring president. 2 bullet wounds gape open in his cold refugee corpse. Charles Ingabire, we mourn for democracy in our country as we weed your graveside. Sad things happen in Museveni's Uganda. A news reporter in press uniform is injured by the police. Stinging tear gas is aimed and sprayed into his eyes. Collateral damage. The police commander shouts as he aims to shoot again. Ali Mivule, we pray for our children as we look into your eyes. Thank you. And a very short poem on press freedom in my country, press freedom in Uganda. And I wrote this and brought it to read because in terms of freedom of the words, although my country doesn't have war, many times we are praised for being a democratic country. And I think the poem illustrates that there's no press freedom for people in the opposition. A soulless ape-like monster sits at the helm of power in our state house. Just like a limelight intoxicated superstar, he saturates our public media with vows. Although the masses know he's a lying fraudster, they clap their hands and gasp with wows. The news is flooded with the smooth-lying gangster. He's wiped out all truths, sacked them as a louse. Against loud cries of the presidential broadcaster, truth is only given in the squeaks of a mouse. Press freedom in Uganda is a quack. Speaking truth is punished at large. Journalists shot dead during work. Newsmen arrested without charge. Media houses razed in the dark. News cameras destroyed with guns. Press house licenses taken back. Critical journalists gagged. News anchors whipped on the back. Truth tellers detained en masse. Thank you very much.
Stella Nyanzi, you have been through very dramatic situations in Uganda. People say you are Uganda's most radical activist. That's what I read about you. You have been twice to jail, and you are a mother of 3 children. It's really quite a lot. Like Stella is also a mother of 2 children. We heard it in the text. You write angry poems. I think they are angry, but they are full of energy. Where did you take the courage to run these risks while you were in Uganda?
Right, I think for me that you say I write angry poems. I think I write about the reality that we live in Uganda. I belong to the opposition, which is a group of people who do not believe in the current militant dictatorship. And I feel so bad because in countries like South Sudan, there is a war. So Stella is inspired by stories of war. I'm inspired by stories of repression, of suppression, of oppression, the everyday violence we see in the street that's not registered as war. The choking, I've told of examples of people who are doing their jobs as journalists, working with cameras, writing newspapers, and the sort of punishments they get, the penalization of free speech is not acceptable. And so I think for me, the courage to speak and say what has to be done is courage to live boldly as a person who has a voice. And I think that writing gives me special privilege. I can write and put my work out there, and it's a matter of being alive. We have to speak these things about dictatorships like that. All of us cannot be silent.
So what kind of difference did it make? Because you had an audience in Uganda, and I guess you still have an audience because you are working online now today, social media, you're very active. So do we have any view on this, any experience?
What difference does being away from Uganda make?
Yeah,
is that your question?
Your literature, your literary work.
I think being away from Uganda has given me space. There is this illusion of safety. The police in Germany is not going to arrest me if I write about the dictator in my country. The level of freedom I have as a Ugandan in exile allows me to speak directly to power in ways that other people who are back home may not speak freely. The borders, you know, you have to get a visa to come to Germany to arrest me. And there's a particular courage that it gives me to write boldly because I know I'm far away. And I think also in my country, there are very many laws which don't allow us to talk about minority groups, yeah? And a lot of the work I was doing before was with queer people in my country. And there's a new law which punishes writing and producing knowledge and sharing knowledge about queer people to up to 20 years, not because one is gay or lesbian, but because one has written and produced knowledge about this minority group, which is criminalized. And I think for me that being in Germany, I take advantage of this distance to write about what's happening with these minorities because I think I'm protected by the distance. And of course, online, social media, webinars, Facebook, Twitter gave me audiences to still write courageously, and the message reaches home. So,
thank you. Yeah, this
Sure.
is very, very interesting to know. I would love to deepen this as well, but we have to switch to our publisher, Manfred Metzner. You have a wonderful name for your publication house, Wunderhorn Verlag. It reminds us of the Romantic time, but maybe it was also rooted there. And you work together with museums on French literature. And since 2010, you focused on African literature.
Right.
So what was the idea behind this?
Yep. Also, das ist falsch, Metzner, nur dass Sie wissen, ich heiße Metzner. So, das kleine Korrektur. Macht nichts. Ich habe viele Namen inzwischen. Okay. Thank you, Astrid.
Okay, sorry.
Okay, Wunderhorn was founded in 1978. So we are children from the 70s when we had been on the streets at Heidelberg during our studies and fighted for freedom and liberties in the third world. At that time, we named it Third World in Germany. And out of this came the foundation of our publishing house, Wunderhorn. And since the early 1980s, Wunderhorn Verlag has been dealing with the consequences of colonialism and associated Eurocentrism. Edouard Glissant, we lived from 1928 to 2011, intellectual pioneer of a poetics and philosophy of world relations and multiplicity, left his mark on us with his discourse on the creolization of societies. Since 2010, we have seen our Africa Wunderhorn series, which is edited by Indra Wusso. So I have to tell that Indra Wusso has a foundation. It's called Silt Foundation, and she lives in Johannesburg in South Africa. And the foundation was founded 20 years ago. It's now the 20th birthday this year. And she worked very much in Johannesburg and in South Africa with writers and artists and gave them grants to come to Sylt. It's an island in northern Germany, very well known in summer, in hot summers. And it was very interesting to see, and I met also the writer there on Sylt, African writers in Sylt. It's interesting how they developed the landscape on Sylt and all these stories, what this island, this magic island for Germans, has to present. So we founded with her the African Wunderhorn series as a logical continuation of our endeavor to help the polyphony of the world's literatures find their rightful place. Since then, 30 books, poetry, prose, reportage, photography, by 28 authors from Angola, Ethiopia, Eritrea, Kenya, Mali, Mozambique, Nigeria, Rwanda, Sierra Leone, South Africa, Uganda, Zambia, and Zimbabwe have been published in the Africa Wunderhorn series. The idea behind this book series is to show in concrete terms how different generations of writers are reacting to a changing Africa. The image of Africa that is painted in Europe, also especially in Germany, is unfortunately often very one-sided and reduces an entire continent to corruption, disasters, wars, and hunger. The reality is, of course, more complex and hopeful, and it is important to let the people there have their say here in German translations. The political and social changes in many African countries and also everyday life there give rise to literature themes and forms that not only arouse interest as such, but can also tell our societies in Europe something new, also about ourselves. With the presence of our authors on the German language book market, we have succeeded in creating comprehensive visibility for them and African themes. This has also led to our authors being regularly reviewed in the art pages, invited to literature festivals in Germany, Austria, and Switzerland, and also receiving the scholarships in Berlin, which is very important to be 1 year in Germany, that you can stay here. We are particularly pleased that we are now also able to work together with the Writers-in-Exile of Penn, Germany. For example, our author Yigala Mepato received the Georg Elsner Prize of the city of Munich. She is now living in Munich. And the Bavarian Art Prize for Literature for her book Ich bin am Leben in 2023. So what we are doing is to present you here in German translation, that you get to know what really happens in Africa on their own voices in German translation. That's all we do.
The both Stellas are the messengers, and you make it happen.
Yes.
Somehow.
We cannot more do, but we do it. So we can do as a publishing house.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. I would like to move on, and hopefully we have maybe at the end a little bit time, to Judith Raupp. She's now joining us from Congo. Warm welcome again to Judith.
Thank you.
She has a master's degree in economics. She's a trained journalist. I keep it a little bit short, your introduction. She's working for many newspapers, for Südwestrundfunk. If you Google her, you can really read a lot of very, very interesting things about what she's doing. And Judith went into the other direction. She went to Africa, and she's actually training young people and make them fit for being radio broadcasters. So maybe you can talk a little bit about what you are doing, and I think we have also some pictures from your work prepared.
Okay. Yeah, well, warm hello from DR Congo to Germany. I am in Goma in eastern Congo. Unfortunately, this region was never in peace since 30 years. And at the moment, we also do have a war going on. So I don't know if you have heard about it. There is a militia group, and according to United Nations, the group is supported by neighboring countries, Uganda and also Rwanda mainly. And so it's like a really difficult situation. So I'm living in Goma since 2011. And since 3 years, I go back and forth, just to give you an idea how I'm connected here. So now my work is I train local radio journalists, especially of community radios. And what we do is we try to bring groups in the society together who are manipulated and think they would be enemies. We do this, for example, even between countries, like we bring journalists from Rwanda and Congo together, and we train them like the normal journalistic work, and we train them to be fact checkers. But what we also do, we bring them together that they do research together in different regions where they are coming from, so that they get to know each other. And then they do radio shows together, and so we have the idea, and we do have success that we think this shows people that they should not accept to be manipulated by people in power. So this is one of the main reasons why I am in Eastern Congo. And I want also to talk a little bit about the topics we have here. Like we said, Voices of Africa, and we said Freedom of the World. I would like to talk a little bit about Voices of Africa. I mean, I don't think that I have to tell you that they are important, and I also normally would not even mention that they are diverse. But when I am in Germany, I still realize that many people think, at least the countries like south of the Sahara, this is all the same. It's just what they call Black Africa, and it's all the same. And this is the reason why I always stress and say, those voices are diverse. And what I also want to stress is those voices are very courageous. And I think Stella, were a better place to talk about what it means to speak out in an African country. And really, I want to tell you that I have all the respect of people like you. And because I have also friends here who are in prison, I have friends who are threatened, and I know how stressful this is to live in such conditions. We are, for example, our province, North Kivu, which has, by the way, lots of raw materials. For example, the Misha M23 seized a town which is called Rubaya, and from Rubaya, 15% of the coltan is coming, which is used worldwide to produce mobile phones and so on. So just to give you an idea for one of the reasons why we have this war going on here. And what I really want also to stress is when I say I am a trainer or a teacher, this does not mean that I do not learn something. I am very grateful to my fellow Africans how they opened my eyes. And as Manfred said, we are in Europe, the view is very often one-sided. And also big thank you to you, Manfred, that you contribute to raise awareness. And it's so enriching, and it broadens your horizon if we listen to each other, and if we accept that people who grew up in other conditions have other point of views, and that those point of views must not be worse than ours. That's very important. And what I think is a real pity, the voices of African people are, from my observation, much too less heard and much less appreciated than they should be. This is in German media, this is in politics, and this is especially also in economics. So
But,
this is what I experience. Yeah?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Judith. I think with your radio station, maybe you can also make a difference. We were talking about war, a lot of war today, and problems, but we are also talking about literature, and literature can be also a sign of hope. So would you think that you could introduce literature from African people living in Germany to, to your broadcast, to your radio station?
I should discuss this with them. I could imagine that they would be interested, because sometimes so we draw a dark picture now with the war and everything, but I mean there is hope, I can tell you, and people are not desperate here. They have a very hard life, but they are so resilient. You should see people here how they live. So they never give up. And if there is something which could help to raise the awareness that there is hope, or describe something where we could go together, I could imagine that they would be open even. And just to give you a little example for the hope I have. So I trained a team of trainers. And as I said, we have over 100 militia. And if you go out of Goma, it's really dangerous. There is a war zone, there is shooting, there's bandits, there's militia. But those trainers, they go out in the little villages to the community radios and train those journalists there. And they bring them the idea that they are one people in Congo and should not be divided. And people appreciate that, and they learn, and they start also fighting for peace and for democracy and for freedom of the war. So you see, there is always hope, and I could imagine to introduce literature. Why not? I mean, of course, I cannot decide for them. It's not my radio station. I just work with them. But I could ask them and see if there is a possibility to introduce this also. And what they do, so it's not literature in the sense of writing books, but they use theater in the radio, and they use like comics in the radio already, just to teach people also, and then why not literature?
Oh, great. Yeah, thank you. We have only a few minutes left, so the last word to our writers here on the podium and to our publisher. Stella, what would be your wish for the future as a writer and also as an activist?
I suppose I wish that this exchange between Africa and Germany, Africa and Europe continues. And I think the point on diversity is important, that there are different voices from Africa representing different realities. And the publishing is important to happen because our voices remain very much back home if we don't have publishers and translators, because many of us don't write in German or English doing the work for us. So that's my wish, that there's more exchange and maybe more from Germany to Africa.
Yep.
Manfred, what is your perspective for the...
My perspective, we continue with these different voices all over the world, because for us it's very important to open the society in Germany, in German-speaking countries, because what we are now living here in Germany and the interest of politics is not on art or literature. The politics, the interest here in German government is in energies. And that is why they are going to African countries and to other countries, because it goes from, they want to have energy. They don't want to read your books or don't want to see your art and your things, and they don't want to be informed what happens in your countries. Because now the first seal is to get energy. Yeah? And I see it because all these political delegations in the last 2 years, which are going to these countries, there is never somebody, a publisher who publishes African literature in Germany, or an artist, to go there, to come into contact, yes, as you said, Judith, to come into contact with you in your own countries. We have to bring you here. Yeah? And that is my hope, that that will change.
So thank you for doing this. And Stella, the last word to you.
I really don't have hope now, but I want to advocate and support for the journalists and writers who are still back there in this dictatorship regime in South Sudan, in Uganda, in Sudan, and in all this region. And we need to support them, to advocate for them so they can do their work. Because now they forced to choose between two, silent or to live. And for me, we need to advocate for them. And even the journalists from the international countries, they know how it goes. In South Sudan, for example, they get arrested, and they did for them very tough things, and they know. And how it is going with the journalists and writers from South Sudan, it is really very tough for them, and I support them in this very critical time.
So thank you that you are here. We are really happy also that we have this chance with our Writers in Exile program to have you here, to invite you here, to hear your voices, to learn from you and from your literature. You really make also a difference here, and you make us richer, I think. As every time I read your poems, it makes me really happy. So thank you all for coming, for participating. Regards to Congo, to Judith. Thank you for having made this effort to join us.
Thank you.
And also thank you
thank
to
you.
Frankfurt Book Fair to making this happen. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Oh, you have